Always Mine by SamadiW. Chapter 12. Draco stirred and raised himself enough to kiss Hermione. They had classes to prepare for, and despite his pleas to stay in bed all day, they reluctantly got up and went about getting ready. It made perfect sense to share the shower. He gently rubbed the sweet-smelling lavender body wash over her and massaged her most sensitive part. They were late anyway, so that they could skip breakfast, but she wanted to devour something else. Hermione snaked down Draco's body and took him fully in her mouth. He heard a low, satisfying groan as she sucked on his growing erection, grabbed hold of her head and thrust into her warm, eager mouth. Super late now. Getting ready was a blur. Hurriedly they scrambled into their uniforms and almost mixed up their ties. Draco groaned and tossed over the crimson tie in disgust to Hermione. Urgently adjusting her skirt, she tucked her shirt and tied her hair in a high ponytail, took her hands and kissed him softly before exiting the dorm. It was one of those days, and she dreaded it. They got to the great hall and reluctantly went their separate ways. No way in hell would he ever sit at her table. As Draco high-fived Blaise and Theo, Hermione watched in interest, sat between them, and sat with his back to the table. He leaned back casually, watching her with enough intensity to make her squirm in her seat. She blushed and almost turned to engage Ginny in conversation when her smile disappeared completely, only to be replaced by anger. Astoria rose to give Draco an affectionate kiss on the cheek. He pushed the Slytherin girl away in annoyance and purposely wiped his face. Hermione narrowed her eyes and Draco shrugged his shoulders. Annoyed and jealous, she turned to Ginny and huffed. "That bimbo," she hissed, unable to stop herself. Ginny asked curiously, "You say something, love?" She followed her friend's gaze towards the Slytherin table and teased, "He's really handsome, isn't he?" Hermione returned to her senses and blushed. "Oh, who are you talking about?" She tried to act casual and throw the redhead off, but Ginny was no fool. Ginny snorted. "You're so bloody obvious, Hermione Granger." Hermione raised a puzzled brow. Ginny rolled her eyes and muttered, "You like Malfoy." Oh, Merlin. Ginny knew. Hermione covered Ginny's mouth and whispered urgently, "Shh! Ron will hear." "Oh shit, so it's true?" Ginny screeched. Hermione rolled her eyes. "No, you want the entire hall to hear?" She drew an imaginary line across her mouth and hissed, "Will you please shut it?" Ginny nodded and grinned mischievously. "Okay, sorry, but you have to tell me everything." Hermione squeezed her friend's hand and nodded. Looking down at the table and then her, she asked very curiously, "Where's Ron?" She added impatiently, "He sent me a message to meet him in the Banner Dada class next to the potions classroom." Harry shrugged. "I have no idea, Hermione." Gathering her books, she took her hat and searched for the red-headed ex. Thinking now it would be great if their little confrontation would be over and done with before her potions class, Hermione walked towards the empty classroom thinking about Draco. Students were already walking along the corridor, and she stopped to shout instructions at some of the third years. The stupid kids were trying to act peeves in the middle of the corridor. Hermione sighed, took a deep breath, and entered the old Dada classroom, ready for a verbal battle with Ronald Weasley. She looked up in alarm at the squeaky but high-pitched moans coming from the corner of the class. She covered her eyes almost at once, but it was too late. Oh, the bloody horror! The most repulsive image of Ron's freckled, bare ass plunging with all his might into a bent-over lavender brown would haunt her forever. She could hear flash meeting flash as Ron relentlessly pounded into lavender. Hermione could no longer hide her disgust and called out loudly, "Ronald Bilious Weasley!" Ron froze, with cock in hand. He turned to face his estranged ex-girlfriend, and a look of repulsion she shot his way. In a flash, shaking forgotten, he pulled up his trousers and tried to run after repulsed Hermione, leaving a dishevelled lavender brown to pull up her panties and skirt awkwardly. Hermione hurriedly walked away from what she had witnessed. Her body shuddered in disgust. Ron caught up and grabbed her hand. wriggled out of his grasp, mortified that he touched her. Hermione rounded on him in fury. "You sent me that letter so I could witness that monstrosity?" Ron looked at her, genuinely confused. "What letter? Oh, I didn't send you any letter." Lavender caught up with them, and Hermione let out a short laugh. She pointed at Lavender and said pointedly, "It was you. You sent me that letter." The other girl cringed and looked away, ashamed. Harry, Draco, Theo, and Blaise, and the other students stood outside the potions class waiting for Suckling to appear. Some leaned against the cool castle walls, most chattered animately among themselves, but the scene unravelling before them was far more entertaining. Draco intently watched Hermione have a go at Weasley. "That's my girl," he thought fondly. Hermione laughed happily. "Well, Lavender, thank you so much for saving me from this piece of a shite excuse of a boyfriend." Ron grabbed Hermione's arm. Draco tensed and reached for his wand. Blaise felt his best friend flex next to him and also reached for his wand. He asked urgently, "You okay, mate?" Draco took a step forward, but Harry was instantly at his best friend's side. He warned in a low, deadly voice, "Let her go." Ron realized Harry was not messing around and let Hermione go without fuss, but with harsh, parting words. "I was tired waiting for prissy, uptight bitch like you to give me what I needed." Hermione stopped dead in her tracks and stared at Ron. He ignored her in the audience and spat. "Oh, I have been fucking Lavender for a month." Draco smiled triumphantly. It was time to make his presence known. Through hooded eyes, she saw the tall, sexy blonde approaching her. When Malfoy walked, people moved out of the way, no questions asked. Without hesitation, Draco approached a very nervous and startled Hermione. He smirked, paused for maximum effect, pulled her towards him, and crushed her lips with his passionately. Her arms went around his neck as he deepened the kiss, almost lifting her off the ground. When they broke apart, the silence was unnerving. Everyone, including a professor or two, stared at the unlikely couple. Ron stood frozen with his mouth open, and Harry merrily stared at them in calculated shock. Draco laced his long fingers through Hermione's, broke the silence, and addressed Ron directly. "If you come anywhere near my girlfriend, I will not hesitate to hex you into the next century, and that's a fucking promise, Weasley." He kissed her knuckles, let go, and walked up to a confused and dumbfounded Gryffindor. The redhead snapped out of his current state of shock and sneered, "Good luck fucking her, you slimy git. She is never going to put it out." Draco let out a low, deadly laugh. "I fucking pity you, mate." Leaning close so only Ron could hear, and rasped, "Hermione needs a man, not a fucking boy. She's absolutely amazing in bed." Ron reached for his wand, but it was too late. Draco dug his wand in the unsuspecting man's ribcage and sneered, "You had your chance and you fucked up. She's mine now." He turned and called over his shoulder, "Deal with it." Draco put his arm around Hermione, and they walked into the potions class without a backward glance. Harry looked after the retreating couple suspiciously, as did everyone else. Blaise and Theo shrugged and hurriedly followed Draco inside. They were the talk of the school. Literally everyone was talking about it. Back in the sanctuary of their dorm, Hermione punched Draco. He fell off the couch and asked, "What?" She stood up and walked towards the kitchen, grabbed a butterbeer and pointed it at him. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" He followed her and wrapped his arm around her. "Yes, I am. And now everyone knows you belong to me." His tone turned serious. "Has Potter spoken to you?" Hermione shook her head sadly. "No, not yet." Draco knew her friends meant much to her, and he didn't want to be between them, no matter how he felt about them. "What if you go to the Gryffindor common room and spoke to him?" he suggested calmly. She thought about it and nodded. It was a good idea. He kissed her forehead. The Weasley girl would be there. She nodded and gave him a strange look. Draco sighed. She will kick her brother's ass if he tries anything. He mused. Blaise told me how she almost tore Weasley to pieces after potions. Hermione bit back a laugh, pocketed her wand, exited the dorm, and went towards the Gryffindor common room. The portrait swung open, and she was met with instant silence as everybody observed her. Some girls glared at her. She didn't know whether it was because she was dating a Slytherin or whether they just fancied Draco. Ron kissed Lavender hotly on the sofa. He glared at her over his lover's head and stated boldly, Hermione, you are not welcome here. She laughed out loud at his ridiculous statement. Who the hell did he think he was? Before she could reply, an angry voice cut through the tension. Ginny yelled, Sod off, Ron! Came his sister's fury reply. Hermione remembered Draco's parting words about Ginny and grinned. Ginny smiled at Hermione warmly from above and asked her to come up. She threw her brother a look of deep loathing before turning away. Harry and she were playing a game of wizarding chess, and Harry was losing. His face was scrunched up in concentration, possibly trying to contemplate his next move or cheat while his girlfriend looked away. Ron watched Hermione go upstairs, and he itched to go after her. Lavender was never meant to be permanent. She was just a means to an end. He was fucking her until his girlfriend was ready to give herself to him. Hermione was the one he truly loved and wanted to be with. Seeing her with Malfoy left a gaping hole in his heart. How could she throw away everything they had for the fucking snake? Hermione looked at Harry and tried to figure out what he was thinking. He turned towards her, smiled reassuringly, got to his feet, and pulled her into a brotherly hug. She hugged him back tightly and felt hot tears stain her cheeks. She asked meekly, So, you're not mad? He laughed at first, then softened. Oh, I'm mad because you didn't tell me, but I'm more concerned. He breathed and continued. This is Draco Malfoy, not some random normal guy. Harry pressed urgently. You know his family and what they would do if they found out about you. His voice cracked with concern for his best friend. Hermione smiled nervously. We haven't had time to think things through. It happened so fast, but I am falling in love with him. Ginny squeezed Hermione's hand in an understanding, and Harry grimaced slightly. It was Malfoy, after all. The words barely left her lips, and they heard a growl of frustration behind them. Ron hurriedly closed the distance between them, but already had her wand out and pointed at him. The deranged man charged forward undeterred. Ginny stood in front of Hermione and tried to calm the situation. She pointed her wand at her brother. Calm down, Ron. I am warning you. He was far away from calming down. Ron was absolutely livid. You love him? You slept with him and you love him? Are you fucking insane? He screamed at the top of his lungs and lunged forward. A stern voice cried out, Petrificus totalis! He went limp and dropped to the ground with a loud thud. Hermione and Harry looked at Ginny in shock. She shrugged. What? I warned him. Hermione looked at them apologetically and left with a heavy heart. She felt a huge weight had been lifted at how Harry took her current relationship status, but he made some valid points, and her heart sank at the revelation that it was Draco's parents who would oppose their love. Draco was asleep when Hermione entered the dorm. After a quick shower, she got in between the sheets and drifted into a dreamless sleep. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Always Mine by SamadiW. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.